Hello, wonderful busy learners, and welcome back to English in Advance. I'm your host, Jessica, and I'm so happy you've chosen to spend this time with me. I know your time is precious. You're juggling work, family, maybe school, and countless other things, which is why we're going to make every single minute you spend here count. Today's episode is specifically designed for you, the busy learner, who is ready to take your English fluency from that comfortable B1 level to a confident, communicative B2. We're going to dive deep into English conversation for busy learners, focusing on real-life practice that you can integrate seamlessly into your already packed schedule. Don't worry, we're not adding more hours to your day. We're just making the hours you have more effective. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's start making English a natural, expressive part of your life. The biggest challenge at the B1 to B2 level isn't learning new grammar. It's activating the grammar and vocabulary you already know so that it comes out smoothly and naturally in a real conversation. Fluency isn't about speaking fast. It's about speaking with ease and without long pauses to translate in your head. Our focus today will be on 3 key areas that are essential for B1 to B2 conversational mastery. First, mastering the art of the natural interjection and filler. Second, handling challenging real-life scenarios, specifically expressing complex opinions and dealing with minor conflict. And third, developing active listening skills to keep the conversation flowing. Let's start with the first point, mastering natural interjections and fillers. You see, native English speakers use these little words and phrases all the time. They are the social oil that lubricates the gears of conversation. Without them, your English might sound technically correct, but it can also sound a bit robotic or too abrupt. They signal that you're thinking, that you're listening, or that you're ready to jump in. One of the most common mistakes I hear from B1 learners is silence when they need a second to formulate an answer. Instead of that silent pause, we can use a thinking filler. For instance, if someone asks you, "What are your plans for the weekend?" and you need a moment to consider, don't just stare blankly. Use a phrase like, let me see, or, well, that's a good question, or even a simple, just a second. These fillers buy you precious time and sound completely natural. They signal to your conversation partner, "I've heard you, I'm thinking, and a good answer is coming." Let's practice a few of these right now. Imagine I've just asked you, what is the biggest challenge facing your industry right now? Try to answer, but first use one of our thinking fillers. Go ahead, practice saying it out loud. Let me see. Now, continue with your thought. Try another one. I'm asking you, if you could travel anywhere in the world tomorrow, where would it be? Start with, well, that's a good question. See how much more relaxed that makes the exchange? Beyond buying time, we use interjections to show we are actively listening and engaged. These are called back-channeling cues. When someone is telling you a story, you don't just sit in silence, do you? You react. We use phrases like, "Oh, really? No way. Gotcha. I see your point," or the classic simple "right" and "uh-huh." These are vital. They show you're following the narrative. Let's try a quick listening exercise. I'm going to tell you a short story, and I want you to react to the parts that seem surprising, confusing, or interesting, using one of these conversational cues. So I was at the coffee shop yesterday morning waiting in line, and this woman in front of me orders a completely bizarre drink. It was a triple shot espresso with oat milk, 2 pumps of caramel, and a dash of turmeric. Now, what would you say? Maybe a dash of turmeric. Oh, really? Yes. And then the barista, who looked like she was having a rough day, actually messed up the order. She forgot the oat milk completely. Your turn to react. Perhaps, "No way, that's annoying." Exactly. But here's the crazy part. The woman just shrugged, paid for it anyway, and left without saying a word, even though she clearly paid for oat milk. How about, "Wow, I see your point. That's unusual." You see, integrating these small natural phrases makes you sound less like someone reciting memorized sentences and more like someone having a real, authentic conversation. For the busy learner, this is fantastic because you can practice these everywhere. Listening to English podcasts, watching a show, or even repeating them to yourself in the shower. They are short and easy to drill. Now let's move on to our second major area: handling challenging real-life scenarios, expressing complex opinions, and dealing with minor conflict. At the B1 to B2 level, you're expected to move beyond simple yes, no answers and express nuanced views. This requires using specific structures that soften your tone and make your opinion sound balanced, not aggressive. The most common way we express a strong opinion politely is by using hedging language. This is the opposite of being direct. It acknowledges that your opinion is just one perspective. Instead of saying, "This plan won't work," which is very blunt, try, "I'm inclined to think that the plan might need a few adjustments," or "I'm not entirely convinced that this is the best approach." The words "inclined to think," "might," and "not entirely convinced" are the hedges. They introduce your view gently. Let's break down a few hedging structures you should use. Introducing a personal view softly. Instead of, "I think that," try, "From my perspective," or "If you ask me," or "My initial feeling is that." Example: "From my perspective, the current timeline is a little too ambitious." Suggesting an alternative or correction gently. Instead of, "You are wrong," try, "I see what you mean, but perhaps we could also consider," or "I take your point. However." Example: "I take your point, however. The budget constraints make that particular option difficult to justify right now." Expressing uncertainty or lack of complete knowledge. Instead of, "I don't know the exact answer," try, "To the best of my knowledge," or "As far as I can tell," or "I could be wrong, but." Example: "And to I could be wrong, but I believe the meeting was rescheduled to Friday afternoon." Now let's put this into practice with a common scenario: a disagreement about a team project or a family decision. I'll be your colleague or partner, and I'll state a position. Your task is to politely disagree and introduce a counter-argument using a hedging structure. My statement is, "I think we should definitely launch the new product in December. The holiday season is the perfect time for maximum sales." How would you respond if you disagree? Say it out loud now. A great B2 response might be, "I see what you mean about the holiday rush, but perhaps we could also consider the increased competition in December. I'm inclined to think a January launch might give us more visibility." See how you acknowledged my idea first, "I see what you mean," before presenting your own? This is crucial for politeness and effective communication. It shows respect and leads to a more constructive exchange. Let's try a different one, a bit more direct conflict, but we still need to keep it polite. I've just told you, "You know, the presentation you gave yesterday was confusing." the data wasn't clear. This is an emotionally charged situation, but we must respond professionally and calmly. How do you defend your work or ask for clarification without becoming defensive? You could say, "I appreciate your feedback. Could you tell me specifically which parts of the data presentation were unclear? I'd like to make sure I understand how to improve it next time." Notice the language here. "I appreciate your feedback" diffuses the situation immediately. "Could you tell me specifically" is a polite way to ask for details, using the modal verb could to soften the question. This is a masterful B2 level response. It is assertive but not aggressive and focuses on improvement rather than blame. Now let's integrate this into the concept of the busy learner. How do you practice this without a conversation partner? You can use the shadowing technique and the scenario rehearsal. For shadowing, listen to a native speaker on a podcast or TV show and repeat exactly what they say. At the same time, they are saying it. Focus not just on the words, but on the intonation and the pauses. When they use a hedge like, "It seems to me that," shadow that phrase. This trains your mouth and brain to produce these complex sentence structures automatically. For scenario rehearsal, take 5 minutes during your commute or while waiting for a meeting to start, and think of a difficult conversation you need to have in English or one you've already had. Mentally rehearse the key phrases you would use, ensuring you use hedging and polite language. For example, think, "How would I tell my boss that the deadline is unrealistic?" Then say the polite B2 level response out loud, "I was wondering if we could quickly discuss the deadline for the report. I'm slightly concerned that given the complexity of the data required, the current date might be a little tight." Rehearsing these specific high-value phrases is a direct path to fluency. This leads us perfectly into our third, often overlooked but critically important area: developing active listening skills to keep the conversation flowing. Speaking is only half of the conversation. If you're busy preparing your next sentence while the other person is talking, you're missing vital information and your response will sound disjointed. Active listening is about truly processing what the speaker is saying and signaling that understanding back to them. We touched on back-channeling with interjections, but let's look at 2 more sophisticated B2 level techniques: paraphrasing for confirmation and asking follow-up questions. Paraphrasing for confirmation means you repeat back the main idea in your own words to ensure you've understood correctly. This is incredibly helpful in a professional or academic setting where clarity is key. It also shows the speaker you are paying close attention. The structure is simple. So, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that, or, let me just make sure I've got this straight. You want us to focus on the marketing strategy before the budget review? Let's practice this now. I'm going to give you a statement and you repeat it back to me using the confirmation structure. My statement: the new company policy states that all employees must complete the mandatory compliance training by the end of next week. Otherwise, they won't be able to access the company network. How would you confirm that you understood the 2 key points, the deadline and the consequence? Say it out loud. A good response. So, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that we need to finish the compliance training by Friday next week, and if we don't, we will be locked out of the network? This is a perfect use of the technique. You've confirmed the information, and you've given the speaker a chance to correct you if you misunderstood. The second part of active listening is asking follow-up questions. A good conversation is not a series of monologues. It's a game of tennis where you pass the ball back and forth. Open-ended follow-up questions show genuine interest and keep the dialogue alive. Instead of a simple yes or no response, ask a how, why, or what question based on the last thing the person said. If someone tells you, "I just started learning how to play the acoustic guitar," a simple low-level response is, "Oh, nice." A better B2 level conversation starting response is, "That sounds interesting. What made you decide to pick up the guitar now?" Or, "That's great. How long do you usually practice each day?" The key phrases for introducing a great follow-up question are, "That sounds fascinating. Could you tell me a little more about?" "I hadn't thought of it that way." "What are your thoughts on?" "That's a great point. How did you come up with the idea to?" Let's try one more practice. I'll tell you something, and you ask a natural, engaging follow-up question using one of these phrases. My statement: "I've been spending my weekends recently volunteering at the local animal shelter." What is your follow-up question? Say it now. You might ask, "That sounds fascinating. Could you tell me a little more about what kind of work you do there?" This is not only grammatically correct, but is also a deeply human response. It shows curiosity, which is the engine of connection in any language. So far, we've covered the conversational tools you need: interjections, hedging, and active listening. Now let's integrate these into a couple of extended, real-life scenarios, which is where the busy learner can really focus their practice time. We're going to look at two common situations: the professional negotiation and the casual social catch-up. The professional negotiation, asking for a raise or promotion. This is a high-stakes conversation where fluency, tone, and hedging are absolutely critical. You want to be assertive about your value while being respectful of the company's position. Imagine you are asking your manager for a raise. You need to present your case clearly and then respond to potential counter-arguments. The B2 opening statement: you should start by expressing appreciation and setting a positive context before making your request. Instead of, "I need more money," try this comprehensive opening. "Thank you for taking the time to meet with me today. As you know, I've been with the company for 3 years now, and I've really enjoyed my time here, particularly with the recent successful launch of Project X. I feel that, given my expanded responsibilities and the results I've delivered, this would be a good time to discuss an adjustment to my current salary." Notice the smooth, professional flow. You've used phrases like, "Thank you for taking the time," "As you know," and "I feel that this would be a good time to discuss," which softens the direct request. Handling a hesitant response. Let's say your manager responds with a common stall. "I appreciate your work, but honestly, the budget for salary adjustments is very tight right now." Your task is to acknowledge their concern, paraphrasing for confirmation, and then gently press for an alternative using hedging. Your response: "I see what you mean about the budget being tight. So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that while my performance merits a raise, the company's current financial situation makes it difficult." Confirmation. "I take your point, however. I was wondering if we could also consider an adjustment to my job title or perhaps an increase in vacation days as an alternative way to recognize my contributions in the short term." Hedging and an alternative suggestion. This is a masterclass in conversational English. You show empathy for the company's constraint, confirm your understanding, and then pivot the conversation to a win-win alternative. This entire exchange, from opening to counter-argument, is an invaluable script for the busy learner to rehearse. The casual social catch-up, sharing and reacting to news. Casual conversations often trip up B1 to B2 learners because they rely on idiomatic expressions and natural interjections, which can't be easily translated. We need to focus on sounding genuinely interested and expressive. Imagine you're having coffee with a friend and they share some interesting news. Your friend says, "Guess what? I finally bought that old cabin in the mountains I was telling you about. I close on the sale next month." Your response should use a strong interjection and an enthusiastic follow-up question. Try this. "No way, that is incredible news." Interjection. "That sounds amazing. What made you decide to pick it up right now, and what are your initial plans for fixing it up?" Enthusiastic follow-up. Notice the difference between this and just saying, "That's good." The B2 response is layered with emotion and specific questions that require the other person to tell you more, thus deepening the connection and extending the conversation. Now, let's say your friend is sharing a minor complaint or frustration. Your friend says, "I'm so frustrated with my new car. It's only 3 months old and I've already had to take it into the repair shop twice for the same electrical issue." Your response needs to show sympathy and offer a gentle, supportive question. Try this. "Oh, really? That is so annoying. I completely understand why you're frustrated." Empathy and interjection. "I see your point about new cars being unreliable. Have you considered asking the dealership if you can just swap it out for a different model?" Supportive follow-up and soft suggestion. This is a moment where using the phrase, "I completely understand why you're frustrated," is much more human than just saying, "I understand." The word completely adds a level of empathy that is essential for a great listening experience. It makes the conversation feel real. The role of intonation and pace, sounding human. For a script ready for voice generation, we must address the human element, intonation and pace. Fluency at the B1 to B2 level is often more about how you say something than what you say. A robotic, flat delivery of perfect grammar will always sound less fluent than a B2 speaker who uses pauses and emphasis correctly, even with a few small errors. Consider the difference in these two statements. "I cannot believe you are going." Flat tone. Sounds like a simple statement of fact. "I cannot believe you are going." Emphasis on believe and going, a rising and falling pitch, shows genuine surprise and excitement. When you practice the hedging phrases we discussed, you must practice the intonation. I take your point, however, the budget constraints make that particular option difficult. The pause before however and the stress on point are key. "Oh, really?" The pitch must rise on really to convey genuine interest or surprise, not just a confirmation. For the busy learner, this comes down to one simple exercise. Listen, pause, and repeat with feeling. While listening to this podcast or any other native English audio, hit pause frequently. Repeat the sentence but exaggerate the emotion you hear. If the speaker sounds excited, sound more excited. If they sound skeptical, sound skeptical. This is active, human-like practice that costs you only a few extra seconds but pays dividends in conversational fluency. Integrating it all for the busy learner. We've covered a lot from small fillers to complex negotiation tactics. Here is the ultimate takeaway for the busy person. The most effective practice is highly targeted and happens in micro moments. You don't have hours for general study, but you have 60 seconds while waiting for the kettle to boil, or 5 minutes during your lunch break. Use those moments to drill high-value phrases. Practice 1, the interjection. Drill. Say 5 different ways to stall for time when asked a difficult question. Let me think. That's an interesting question. Just a second. Well, I'm not sure. Practice 2, the hedging drill. Say 3 different ways to disagree politely. I see your point, but I'm not entirely convinced that. I'm inclined to think that. Practice 3, the listening drill. Summarize the last news headline you read in English using a confirmation phrase. So, if I'm understanding the article correctly, the mayor is proposing a new tax on. By making your practice focused, emotional, and context-specific, you ensure that the phrases you learn are ready to be deployed the moment a real conversation starts. Fluency at the B2 level is not about perfection, it's about agility. It's about having the right tool, the right phrase, ready on the tip of your tongue so you don't hesitate, translate, or pause awkwardly. Remember, every time you use an English phrase to connect with someone, to show empathy, or to express a nuanced opinion, you are not just practicing grammar. You are building a deeper, more human connection. And that, my friends, is the real goal of conversational fluency. I truly hope this deep dive into conversational fluency has given you some powerful, actionable tools that you can integrate into your busy life right away. Thank you for joining me, Jessica, here on English in Advance. Now, here is your call to action. I want you to pick one phrase from today's script, maybe a hedging phrase like, I'm inclined to think, or an interjection like, no way, that's incredible, and make a commitment to use it in your next real-life English conversation, or even just say it out loud 3 times before you go to sleep tonight. Just one phrase. Make it yours. If you found this script helpful, please share it with other busy learners who are also striving for that B2 confidence. Your support helps us continue to create these detailed, human-focused learning resources. Keep practicing, keep connecting, and I'll talk to you next time. Goodbye for now.